sister and I were reborn back to the nursing home. My younger sister and I were doing our internship assessments at the nursing home. And we had two patients urgently needing our care. One was a bedridden, partially paralyzed old man in the outskirts of the city. And the other was a young, wealthy, and handsome man living right in the nursing home. Without a second thought, my sister put on her makeup and went straight into the room of the rich boy, leaving the job of caring for the paralyzed old man to me. She got pregnant before marriage and managed to marry the rich heir. But just a few days after the wedding, the heir's family faced a downfall. He and his mother were both sent to prison. And my sister was beaten by enemies of the family, losing the baby in a miscarriage, which drove her insane. On the other hand, the paralyzed old man whom I cared for left his villa and wealth to me when he passed away. It took me a lot of effort to find my sister, and when she heard that I had inherited the villa, she was filled with jealousy. She pushed me in front of a speeding truck. The truck lost control and she couldn't escape either. Both of us were hit and killed. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the day when we had to choose the patients in the nursing home. This time, my sister didn't hesitate and chose to care for the paralyzed old man. She couldn't help but feel secretly pleased. The villa will be mine this time. Finally, wealth and fortune have come my way. I chuckled. Oh, my sister. Do you think that villa is so easy to inherit? But since you're so eager to jump into the fire pit, I won't stop you. One patient is a bedridden old man living out on the outskirts. And the other is a young guy in room 302 here at the nursing home. You two can decide how to split the work. As long as there are no complaints by the end of the assessment, you'll both be officially hired. Head nurse Lois stood in front of my sister and me with the assessment records in hand. Before I could say anything, Selena volunteered eagerly. I'll take care of the paralyzed old man. It's a dirty and tiring job, so it's better if I handle it, so that no one can say I'm bullying my sister. As soon as she finished speaking, she rushed back to her room to pack her bags. She turned away so quickly that even Lois was stunned. It was clear that she didn't understand why my younger sister, who usually fussed over doing extra work, was suddenly so eager to volunteer today. But from Selena's secretly pleased expression, I knew she had reincarnated as well. The staff in the nursing home started to gossip. Going so far out to take care of an old man, Selena really has courage and responsibility. Probably because her sister didn't want to go. She seems nice usually, but who would have thought she'd let her younger sister go instead? Obviously, she's got her eye on the handsome rich guy in room 302. It's always the seemingly harmless ones who have the most schemes. Listening to the chatter, Selena seemed quite satisfied. She pursed her lips in a smug smile. Sis, let me tell you, Nathan Lloyd may be rich, but he doesn't look easy to win over. Good luck. I waved her off. Don't worry about me, you should just take care of yourself. She dismissed my words. What harm can an old man who's about to die do to me? As she was about to leave, she discreetly rubbed her hands together in anticipation. The villa is finally mine, I'm going to be rich, so rich. I chuckled. Oh, my sister. Do you think that villa is so easy to inherit? But if you're so willing to jump into the fire pit, I won't stop you. I have more important things to do. In the last life, my grandmother suddenly had a brain hemorrhage and needed money urgently for surgery. I was planning to quit and find a job that paid quickly just as the assessment came up. Normally, assessments involved caring for patients within the nursing home. But the original caregiver for the paralyzed old man had an emergency back in her hometown. The director offered a $2,000 allowance, and whoever took care of the old man would get the money. My sister didn't want to suffer hardships. And I thought the money would be enough to cover a few days of hospital stay for my grandmother, so I agreed. Selena, who chose to care for the wealthy young man, scoffed at me. Sis, you're a college graduate. Don't you have any sense? Marry a rich guy and you'll have everything you want. Relying on her looks, she hooked up with that rich heir while nursing him. But little did she know that the moment the heir was discharged, he'd cut ties with her. But Selena got pregnant. In the end, she forced him to marry her because of the baby. However, just a few days after the wedding, the Lloyd family's distillery suddenly faced a downfall. Selena's mother-in-law and husband both ended up in jail, sentenced to life. She tried to flee home overnight, but the family's enemies beat her until she miscarried. Terrified, she became mentally unstable, too ashamed to return home, and ended up scavenging for food on the streets. And the paralyzed old man I cared for during those 40-plus days left his villa and remaining wealth to me when he passed away. By the time I got the money, my grandmother was already gone. Her dying wish was to see my sister one last time. I went through hell to find my sister, who was living on the streets. When she heard that I had inherited the villa, she was consumed by jealousy. She pushed me in front of a speeding truck. The truck swerved out of control and she didn't escape either. We both got hit and died. Sadly, my dying grandmother didn't get to see her, nor did she get to see me one last time. Now, I didn't have time to deal with Selena. My only goal was to gather $300,000 for my grandmother's surgery within 43 days. Nathan Lloyd, the rich guy, was staying in room 302. When I entered, he was sitting with his leg in a cast, frowning at his laptop. The moment he noticed me, his expression turned to one of annoyance. Great, just when I was finally making some progress, you had to interrupt, he snapped. This room doesn't need cleaning. Get out. I had heard about Nathan's temper. In the previous life, when Selena walked in all dolled up, he didn't even bother looking at her before kicking her out. But the new bed linens, mop, and bucket I had struggled to drag up 3 flights of stairs were sitting right there. And now he wanted me to leave just because he said so? Ignoring him, I continued changing the pillowcases. Didn't you hear me? Are you deaf or something? He shouted, slamming his mouse on the desk. I paused and glanced at his laptop screen. He quickly blocked my view with his hand. What are you staring at? Didn't you hear me? Do I need to repeat myself? You really don't take a hint, do you? He sneered, glaring at me. I met his gaze calmly. I just need 3 minutes. Seeing that his attitude wasn't getting through to me, Nathan finally sighed in defeat. He picked up his laptop and, with great reluctance, dragged his cast-covered leg over to the desk by the window. I finished changing the sheets, mopped the floor, and was about to take out the trash when he called out, "Hold on." In the bright light from the window, Nathan's chiseled face looked striking, but his superior attitude was less than appealing. "Ailsa Hamilton, right?" he asked. "You said you'd be done in 3 minutes, but you took 20. That's inefficient and has disrupted my work. You can expect a complaint." Wait, he was going to complain because I followed standard cleaning procedures? I smiled calmly. When did I say I'd finish cleaning in 3 minutes? His jaw clenched as he realized I wasn't backing down. I didn't expect to meet such a shameless person in a nursing home, he muttered. Forget it, I'm not going to complain. You can just wait to be fired. The more irritated he became, the calmer I felt. Seeing him so riled up made me smile inwardly. Oh, right. I just remembered, I said, snapping my fingers. When I said 3 minutes, I was talking about this. I pointed at his laptop. After typing a quick string of code, I hit enter and the program ran perfectly. 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Throwing the bed sheets over my shoulder, I grabbed the trash bag and mop and walked casually out of the room. Nathan was left behind, pointing at his laptop and then at me, his mouth open in disbelief, unable to form a single word. When he had slammed the mouse earlier, I had been ready to leave. But one glance at his screen and I knew I had this under control. The problem he had been struggling with all night? I had solved it back in high school. I should have mentioned I had been interested in programming and Java since elementary school. In college, I even developed an antivirus software. When my grandmother fell ill, I tried to sell it, but no company was willing to take a chance on a female college student's work. So it was pure luck that I ran into Nathan and his problem. As the door clicked shut behind me, I thought, Nathan, just you wait. You'll be the one investing in me soon enough. Over the next few days, Nathan kept asking me about this and that, and was clearly puzzled by how a girl could be so skilled at programming. I was equally puzzled as to why a rich heir like him didn't just hire a tutor. But I didn't ask. After all, he started taking over tasks like making the bed, sweeping the floor, and taking out the trash, even dragging his injured leg around to do them. It helped build a rapport and it took some of the workload off my shoulders, so why not? More than half a month passed. I didn't pay much attention to the gossip around the nursing home. After all, they weren't wrong, I was in it for the money. Seeing how close I was getting with Nathan, I planned to talk to him about investing right after my lunch break. The sooner I could arrange for my grandmother's surgery, the sooner she could recover. As I was heading downstairs for lunch, I ran into Nathan's mother, Gloria. She looked much thinner in person than she did in photos, bending over to tie the straps of her high heels. She tied the laces swiftly and precisely with the ends perfectly aligned, showing she was someone who valued efficiency. While waiting in line for food, I overheard some of the staff gossiping about Gloria. After her husband passed, she took over the family's distillery and made it even more successful. She's a real power woman, that's for sure. Yeah, but what does it matter? I heard she doesn't get along with her son. If he hadn't gotten injured, she probably wouldn't even be here. That last comment made sense. Nathan had been in the nursing home for over 20 days, and this was only Gloria's second visit. Figuring they had a lot to talk about, I decided not to go back upstairs right away. Instead, I stayed downstairs to hang some laundry. I had just finished hanging a sheet when the sound of hurried high heels on the stairs caught everyone's attention. We all looked up to see Gloria gripping the handrail with a stern expression. "Who here is Elsa?" she demanded. When Selena returned to the nursing home to grab her toiletries, she walked right into a scene where Nathan's mother was berating me. "If you want to pursue my son, do it openly. I don't mind your background. But if you think you can manipulate your way into the Lloyd family, you might as well give up now." The director shot me a look signaling me to keep quiet. Humbly, he tried to placate the sharp-tongued Gloria, apologizing profusely. After a while, she finally seemed to calm down and left. As soon as she was gone, Selena couldn't resist taunting me. Well, looks like your plan to get close to him backfired, didn't it? Actually, I should take some blame here. I only told you that getting close to Nathan wouldn't be easy. I forgot to mention his mom despises anything related to coding. It became clear to me that Selena had timed her return to witness my embarrassment, knowing Gloria would show up today. She wanted to see me humiliated. But I barely listened to her muttering. As I watched Gloria's figure retreat into the distance, I made a decision. If Nathan didn't have the final say in his family's affairs, why not aim to win over his mother directly? Selena, mistaking my silence for frustration at being unable to enter high society, leaned in and helpfully whispered a suggestion in my ear. "Hey sis, want me to teach you a trick? Slip him something, and once the deed is done, there's no going back. He's the son of a public figure after all. That'll guarantee you a spot in the family." Her smug grin made everything clear. No wonder she managed to marry into the Lloyd family so quickly in our previous life. She had used underhanded tactics. Nathan might have a bad temper, but he also had a soft heart. Just a few days ago, a stray cat had somehow wandered into his room. Though he grumbled and cursed, he still limped around, giving it water and even asked me to buy some cat food. When a patient's family adopted the cat later, he couldn't stop mentioning how much he missed the little thing. I couldn't understand before. How could someone so kind-hearted towards animals turn his back on a person? Now it was clear Selena had gone to great lengths to secure her future. After offering her suggestion, she couldn't resist bragging about her own situation. "Sis, you wouldn't believe how filthy that old man is. Sometimes the whole bed reeks, but I still take good care of him. He probably won't last much longer. Who knows, maybe when he dies, he'll leave the villa to me. What do you think?" Mr. Marshall, the paralyzed man, had actually treated me well in our previous life. At least Selena was motivated by the prospect of inheriting his villa, so she would take care of him properly. I put on an envious face. "Oh, you better take good care of him, sis. If he leaves the villa to you, you'll be sitting pretty." "Of course I will." She beamed, her face full of pride. "Let's hope I get the villa and you manage to marry into the Lloyd family." Hearing her speak so confidently as if everything was already in the bag, I couldn't help but click my tongue. She probably didn't realize that the moment she received that will, her nightmare would just begin. Under new circumstances, a different fate comes. Nathan's computer had been smashed by his mother. She wouldn't let him dabble in anything related to technology. My mom was originally a big supporter of integrating online and offline sales, but my dad was completely against it. He was old-fashioned and didn't trust online management or logistics, which caused a lot of arguments between them. Eventually he gave in. But during a meeting with an e-commerce CEO, a sleep-deprived programmer snapped after being scolded and ended up stabbing both of them to death, Nathan told me. Since then, his mother had harbored a deep resentment toward e-commerce and anyone working in the tech industry. She absolutely forbade Nathan from pursuing anything related to it. She blames herself but won't admit it. Instead, she's shifted all her hatred onto the tech industry. Nathan looked at his broken computer with a mix of sadness and frustration. Technology has advanced so much. But every factory we own only has 2 computers, one for accounting, tax reporting, and inspections, and one for surveillance. My mom is so stubborn no one can change her mind. A thought crossed my mind. I suddenly remembered that in our previous life, the Lloyd family's distillery was exposed for mixing fake liquor, leading to a fatality. The security cameras malfunctioned conveniently, preventing them from retrieving the records of the workers involved. And both his mother and husband were sentenced to life in prison. The distillery's collapse was swiftly followed by a rival company snapping up their trademark, painting Gloria as a woman who had mismanaged the business. But listening to Nathan now, it was clear that his parents had a deep bond. Why then did the rival company twist the truth? Could it be that they exploited Gloria's aversion to technology? As thoughts swirled in my mind, a plan began to take shape. Nathan, how about we strike a deal? I'll fix your computer and help convince your mom to support your tech ventures. Most importantly, I can help your family avoid the risk of going under. Nathan didn't believe for a second that his family's distillery could go under. But to get the freedom to do what he really wanted, he agreed to partner with me. You're just a caregiver. You can't be doing this out of the goodness of your heart. What's your angle? Money? I didn't bother hiding it. Yeah, it's about the money. I need to raise funds for my grandma's surgery. He looked thoughtful, then with a resigned expression started patting down his pockets, which were as empty as his wallet. I shoved the leaking laptop into its case. Forget it. Stop looking. A rich kid like you who can't even afford cat food, what kind of money do you actually have? I'll let the cat food slide, but don't forget to pay me when I fix your computer. He raised his handsome face, saluted me with mock seriousness, and said teasingly, "You understood, Professor Hamilton." Today was March 24th. In my previous life, Mr. Marshall passed away on March 28th. 3 days later, my grandmother's condition worsened. That meant I had only 10 days to get everything in order. Right now, I need to convince Gloria that advanced technology was crucial for the growth of her business. As I was leaving after getting the laptop fixed, I ran into Selena, who was returning to the nursing home with a load of supplies. She was all smiles and didn't even notice me. "Why did you bring back so much stuff?" asked the head nurse, who had softened her attitude toward Selena since she volunteered to take on the tougher job. "Mr. Marshall passed away yesterday and I just finished arranging everything today," Selena said, adjusting the delicate braid resting on her collarbone. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by a look of distress more intense than when our grandmother was gravely ill. Lois, the head nurse, patted her shoulder sympathetically. "Oh dear, it's just part of life. We all have to face it." My heart skipped a beat. I pulled out my phone to confirm the date. It was indeed March 24th. But how could Mr. Marshall have died 4 days early? Could this mean that my grandmother might? My heart raced and I quickened my pace. I made a point of visiting a nearby repair shop close to Nathan's family's main distillery. Nathan mentioned that his mother would be there today for inventory. While the technician was fixing the laptop, I tried to talk to his mom about the investment opportunity. But as expected, she dismissed me, justifying her decision with the usual "good products sell themselves, and our distillery has thrived without needing advanced technology." With the laptop repaired, I clenched my teeth. If talking didn't work, I would have to take a bolder approach. I called the hospital and asked the nurse to contact Nathan if they couldn't reach me. She told me my grandmother had fallen unconscious again and her condition didn't look good. "The doctor says that even if we operate now, the risks are still high," she added gently. "You're a student and it's tough. If it's too much, maybe it's time to consider your grandma's wishes." I couldn't shake the image of my grandmother lying peacefully in her hospital bed from my mind. Just a few days ago, I had argued with the doctor to delay the payment for her bed. She had regained some consciousness and called out my name weakly. I was overjoyed as she held my hand. "Sweetheart, listen to me, don't waste money on me. Grandma wants to go home and cook for you." I knew she wanted to live. But we didn't even have a home anymore. So even if there was a slim chance, I wouldn't give up. I lied, telling her I was busy with work and that I'd come to get her next time. She held onto my hand like a child and said weakly, "All right, but please hurry." Her hair, once thick and gray, now seemed as light and sparse as wisps of smoke. My heart felt heavy. It had been 3 days since Mr. Marshall's death. I wasn't sure if today would be the day for my grandmother. After thinking it over, I decided to ask my sister for help. Selena had quit her job after returning to the nursing home. Before I could say anything on the phone, she cut me off. Sis, the villa was transferred to me, but it hasn't been sold yet, so I don't have any money for Grandma's treatment. I knew she had also received a cash gift of $50,000, but I also knew she wouldn't give it up. That wasn't my intention anyway. Don't even think about guilting me into this. You were always Grandma's favorite after Mom and Dad passed away. She was the one who doted on you. We already sold the house for her treatment and she didn't get better. If you ask me, it's just throwing money down the drain. I was trembling with anger while she sounded so nonchalant. You should worry about yourself, sis. Have you gotten your period yet? How are things going with Nathan? Hearing my silence, she laughed. You can't lecture me, sis. Looks like you're not so serious about getting Grandma treated either. I had just wanted her to see Grandma one last time if my plan failed. Grandma had wanted to see her so badly in my previous life. But now I felt that Selena didn't even deserve my anger. She didn't deserve to see Grandma at all. 2 days later, the Lloyd family's distillery was reported for producing counterfeit alcohol. And there were also discrepancies in their financial records. When the police arrived, Gloria was adamant that they had been framed. She insisted that the surveillance footage would prove the fake alcohol had been planted intentionally. But as luck would have it, there had been a power outage on the day the goods were delivered, and there was no footage from that day. Additionally, the financial records on the computer had mysteriously been altered. Although Gloria suspected foul play by her competitors, she lacked concrete evidence to prove it. Gloria managed to keep the media frenzy at bay while continuing her private investigation. The next day, they all showed up at the nursing home. When Nathan, accompanied by the police, confronted me, I was lounging in the garden, enjoying the sunshine. Elsa, I trusted you. Why did you betray me? He thrust his phone at me, showing records of my conversations with his competitors, his eyes red with rage. Gloria also rushed over, gripping my arm tightly. No wonder you cozied up to my son, this was your plan all along. You're going to come clean to the media right now if Prestige Distillery is behind this, or I'll make sure you regret it. Everyone around was watching the scene unfold, and even the director didn't know how to intervene. I let Gloria pull at me, but then I couldn't help but laugh. Mrs. Lloyd, remember when you refused to invest in my software? You called it worthless. Well, I guess you're getting what you deserve now. She slapped me hard across the face. The force of the blow left my ears ringing, and I could see the fury in her eyes. She looked like she wanted to strangle me right then and there. Nathan yanked me aside, shouting, Elsa, is it money you want? If we pay for your grandmother's surgery, will you confess who put you up to this in front of the media? Gloria, who had been seething with anger, paused upon hearing that there might be a way to resolve things. She turned to me, her expression cold but controlled. I leaned back, crossing my arms behind my head. That depends on my mood. If my grandmother dies, no one's getting out of this unscathed. The crowd around us murmured in surprise. Gloria, crossing her arms and narrowing her eyes, asked sharply, which hospital is she in? What's her name? After I told her, she made a quick phone call. Is the account still active? Transfer $300,000 to the city hospital. Yes, right now. And make sure the head surgeon operates. The gloomy sky suddenly seemed brighter, and even the birds began to sing. The tension in my heart finally eased, and I took a deep breath as I stood up, ready to let the police take me away. The police took my statement slowly, each word dragging out as if time itself had slowed. I could barely manage to say 2 words in 3 minutes. Gloria, who had been standing nearby, said nothing. But the young officer across from me was less patient, slapping the table in frustration and urging me to speak faster. My mind was a chaotic mess, filled with flashes of the terrible scenes from my past life. The news of my grandmother's death, her frail body, the screeching brakes of the truck that hit me. It all replayed in my mind, jumbling together. Forget it. Let's wait until her grandmother's surgery is over, Gloria said, her voice less cold than before. I glanced at her with a mix of gratitude and surprise. The 2 officers, seeing Gloria relent, relaxed as well, chatting quietly among themselves. Through the small window of the interrogation room, Nathan's face would occasionally appear, pacing back and forth outside. Gloria noticed too and asked softly, "Is he waiting for news from the hospital as well?" I clenched my fists, feeling restless and anxious, not replying to her question. She lowered her eyes and said nothing more. A little while later, she stood up and gently patted my shoulder, her voice unexpectedly tender. "Don't worry. With a granddaughter like you, willing to do anything to save her, your grandmother is going to be okay." Those words hit me hard, tugging at my heartstrings, and a wave of emotion surged up to my throat. I bit my lip hard, trying to hold back the tears. Time ticked by slowly, and the two officers, growing restless, left the room to stretch their legs. Gloria, however, remained calm, occasionally glancing out the window. 2 hours and 24 minutes later, Nathan finally appeared, holding my phone with a broad grin. He gave me an okay sign, signaling that the surgery had been a success. I couldn't hold back any longer. The tension that had kept me together snapped, and tears poured from my eyes, streaming down my face as I broke into loud sobs. The two officers, returning just then, assumed that Gloria had been scolding me and tried to comfort me, their earlier sternness gone. "Come on, don't cry. You almost ruined a whole company. She has a right to be upset with you. But everyone makes mistakes and you're still young. Just don't do it again." Gloria handed me a tissue without a word. After I calmed down, the officers reminded me that I still needed to complete my statement. I dried my eyes but hesitated to speak. "Why aren't you talking?" one officer asked. "Hey. I'm not going to accuse Prestige Distillery," I replied. What?" The officers were shocked, clearly not expecting me to change my story. I looked up at Gloria, who was standing beside me. "Mrs. Lloyd, this was my idea. It has nothing to do with Prestige Distillery. To be precise, I acted before Prestige Distillery could make a move. I could have waited until they tampered with things and then convinced Gloria. But I was worried my grandmother couldn't wait that long. I tried every possible way. From what I had researched, the Lloyd family's Riverstone distillery had strict controls over the distilling process, and the raw materials were all high-quality grains. They upheld a century-old reputation with a clear conscience. Gloria Lloyd, though strict on the surface, was very generous with her employees. She was well regarded by all the suppliers. On the other hand, the CEO of Prestige Distillery delayed paying wages and squeezed farmers on grain costs. The company's reputation on various forums wasn't good. I believe that to run a successful business, one must first be a good person. And my grandmother always taught me that whatever you do, you must ask yourself if you are being true to your conscience. So how could I possibly collude with such a sinister company like Prestige Distillery to frame them? I couldn't save my grandmother's life by doing something that would go against her values. But this situation was caused by me, and I was willing to take responsibility for it. Ivafet et Natan. When he presented the complete surveillance footage to the police, everyone was stunned. They hadn't expected that the person wearing a hat and placing a box of fake wine was Nathan himself. On the day of delivery, the power outage in the factory was actually caused by Nathan cutting the lines. Though he didn't cut the power to the wine storage area, he just temporarily shut it off. The footage from that day was stolen by me using technical means. The altered financial records on the computer were also done by me hacking into the system. Gloria shot a glare at her son, who quickly lowered his head in apology. I too felt guilty. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lloyd. It was my idea. I'm willing to bear the responsibility. I'll repay the surgery costs and the damages caused to the distillery bit by bit. If you still feel wronged, I'm willing to give my life in exchange." Gloria, who had been fuming, turned her gaze on me. "And how much do you think your life is worth?" Nathan and I exchanged glances, neither of us daring to breathe. Gloria stared at the table, saying nothing for a long time. After a while, she rubbed her temples and sighed. Forget it. There's no point in pursuing this. It's better for you to work off your debt slowly. The media was handled in time, so it didn't cause much damage. And since my son was involved as well, I can't put all the blame on you." Turning to the police officers, she added, "Let's just treat this as a misunderstanding." "But..." She looked back at Nathan. "She did it to save her grandmother, but what about you? What were you doing it for? Do you like her?" It wasn't that, but Nathan's face turned red anyway. Maybe I misread the situation. I leaned over and whispered something in Gloria's ear. Although she wasn't willing to invest in my firewall and antivirus software, she agreed to try it out for free. "All right, I'm leaving. You should go check on your grandmother," she said. Watching her tie the straps on her high heels, I suddenly remembered something and pulled out a pack of grip pads from my pocket. "Your feet are on the slender side, so your shoes might slip. Try these," I suggested. She paused for a moment and took the pads. After slipping them into her shoes, she muttered, "I have to admit, these do help a lot." She glanced at me puzzled. Why do you have these if you don't wear high heels yourself?" Feeling a bit embarrassed, I replied, "I noticed that your feet seemed uncomfortable the last couple of times we met, so." A rare smile spread across her face. "Well, thanks, Elsa. Get me some more of these next time." Nathan grinned. "Sure thing, Mom. I'll bring them home for you." Gloria shot him a stern look. "Must you stick your nose into everything?" "The doctor said my grandmother's surgery was successful. But they couldn't guarantee there wouldn't be any complications." I silently prayed that she would wake up safe and sound. After several days, she finally woke up. I held her and cried with relief. Nothing else mattered as long as she was okay. I heard that after a few more days in the hospital she would fully recover. She was so happy that she ate a big meal. I observed her recovery, and thankfully there seemed to be no lasting effects. Watching Nathan stand behind me, my grandmother beamed with pride, showing him off to the patient in the next bed. "A look at my granddaughter's boyfriend, isn't he handsome? Don't they make a lovely couple?" I was about to clarify that he was a rich heir and she shouldn't be making assumptions, but before I could, Nathan tugged at my sleeve. "If it makes Grandma happy, just let her believe it. No harm in letting you gain a little something," he whispered. I elbowed him in the ribs, causing him to grunt in pain, but my grandmother just smiled warmly. Young couples, always flirting," she chuckled. Nathan grinned foolishly. "Elsa, you've got to help me." The harmonious atmosphere was suddenly shattered by a familiar voice. I turned around to see Selena. A few days ago, my sister was flaunting her designer bags and luxury watches on social media. Today, she was huddled in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh, I almost forgot. It must be because that old lady, the one who abandoned Mr. Marshall when he was bedridden, had come back. In the previous life, when Mr. Marshall was on his deathbed, a woman in her 60s suddenly showed up at the villa. She claimed to be a former housekeeper and said she had come to check on the old man. We exchanged a few words, and when she heard Mr. Marshall was dying, she stayed for a short while before leaving. But then, on the day of Mr. Marshall's funeral, she appeared at the funeral home, pointing at me and wailing hysterically. "This woman killed my husband. She took advantage of his confusion to trick him into giving her the villa." I was completely dumbfounded. Mr. Marshall had told me about his wife before. She had run off with a few $1,000s of his pension years ago when he fell ill because she didn't want to take care of him anymore. When he heard about my grandmother's illness, he transferred the property to me. At that time, I didn't dare accept such a large inheritance, but Mr. Marshall, with tears in his eyes, insisted. "Child, I have no demands. I've lived a life full of regrets. I just want to die with some dignity. The care you've given to this childless old man these past days has made him feel content. If you don't accept it, you'll break my heart. I don't want to leave anything for that heartless woman. If you don't take it, I'll burn it all down and be done with it." I felt conflicted but eventually agreed. So when that woman produced pictures of their life together, I realized she wasn't a housekeeper at all. She was Mr. Marshall's so-called heartless wife. She hadn't come back to see Mr. Marshall out of concern. She was just waiting for him to die so she could inherit his estate. But by then Mr. Marshall had already been cremated. So she spread rumors that the villa was haunted, claiming Mr. Marshall's restless spirit wouldn't leave. That wasn't enough for her, though. She even accused me of murdering him for his money, stirring up a storm of online harassment from people who didn't know the truth. Walking down the street, I'd occasionally have stones thrown at me. During those days, I had to be heavily disguised just to visit my grandmother. Looking at Selena's dark circles and pale complexion, I could tell she had already realized what a nuisance that old woman could be. Nathan made an excuse to leave and get some food. Selena, her eyes vacant and clearly exhausted, grabbed my hand, pleading pitifully. "Elsa, you have to help me. That old hag won't let them cremate Mr. Marshall. She's accusing me of killing him for his money." I shook her off immediately. "What does that have to do with me? Go talk to that old hag, I replied coldly. Sis, I offered to give her the villa, but she still won't agree. She's insisting on having Mr. Marshall's body examined, Selina said, her voice full of desperation. Then why are you coming to me? I'm not a forensic expert, I said, growing impatient. Sis, can't you ask Nathan's mom to help me out? She begged. It turned out she had returned to the nursing home after hearing that Gloria had paid for our grandmother's surgery. Everyone assumed that Nathan and I were together. Now she wanted me to ask Nathan's mom to pull some strings with the police or the coroner to help her out. The audacity. I can't help you, I said bluntly. If she wants an autopsy, let her have one. What are you so scared of? He wasn't. As I said this, a sudden realization hit me, stopping me mid-sentence. Could it be? Did Mr. Marshall not die of natural causes? Was it Selina? She avoided my gaze, and seeing that I remained unmoved despite her pitiful act, she let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, of course, you're living the good life now, marrying into a wealthy family. Why would you help me? If you won't help, fine. I'll go to Grandma. She'll find a way to save me. She stumbled to her feet and headed for the hospital room. Grandma just recovered. Don't stress her out again, I warned, but Selina ignored me, shaking me off with surprising strength as she marched toward the room. I felt a surge of frustration. Lifetimes and feared nothing, my grandmother was my one weak spot. In the previous life, when Grandma heard that Selina had married into a wealthy family, she didn't blame her for not using the money to treat her illness. She only lamented that Selina hadn't come to visit her. Even when she could barely speak, she still mumbled Selina's name. I knew how much Grandma loved Selina. No matter what terrible things she did, Grandma would never abandon her. If she heard about this situation, she'd probably jump out of bed and beg Nathan for help immediately. Forget it, I'll just play it by ear. I followed Selina into the room only to find Grandma hiding under the blankets. When I called her name, she finally peeked out from under the covers. Sweetheart, come here. This girl says she's also my granddaughter. But I'm sure I only have one granddaughter, and it's you, she said. Grandma had lost her memory, selective amnesia to be exact. She had completely forgotten my sister, Selina. No matter what Selina said, Grandma just kept insisting she didn't recognize her. Was this a side effect, perhaps? Selina, in a fit of frustration, finally broke down, pulling at her hair and shouting. Oh, what an act! You're really good at pretending, aren't you? Her outburst frightened Grandma, who was already nervous. Thankfully, Nathan arrived just in time and called security to escort Selina out. Later, she was arrested by the police. A forensic examination was conducted on Mr. Marshall's body, and traces of poison were indeed found in his stomach. But what shocked everyone was the discovery of two different poisons, cyanide and rat poison. The results were a startling revelation. Not only was Selina taken into custody, but the old woman who had posed as a housekeeper was arrested as well. My mind was reeling as the pieces fell into place. In the previous life, that old woman had shown up pretending to be a former housekeeper, but she was actually Mr. Marshall's wife. She was eager to get her hands on the inheritance, so she slipped rat poison into Mr. Marshall's oatmeal while I wasn't looking. What she didn't know was that after she left, Mr. Marshall suddenly had a craving for a sandwich, and he never touched that bowl of oatmeal. When Mr. Marshall passed away and the old woman learned that the estate had been left to me, she accused me furiously of murder. But why would Selina have had the patience to make sandwiches for Mr. Marshall? It was now clear that she had also poisoned him. In this life, both of them got exactly what they deserved. The old woman wanted to get her hands on Mr. Marshall's estate sooner, and my sister wanted to claim the villa early. Both of them poisoned Mr. Marshall on the same day, planning to pin the blame on each other if caught. But in the end, they were both arrested together. The irony of the situation was striking. It was only a shame that Mr. Marshall, who could have lived for another 4 days, had his life cut short. The day Selina was convicted, Nathan brought me some good news. His anti-tracking software had successfully been bundled with my antivirus software. The tracking software could trace the origin of a virus, and shortly after they were integrated, they intercepted a virus that had been sent from Prestige Distillery. Following my advice, Nathan pretended to be unaware. On the day the power went out in the wine cellar, he, his mother, and a group of police officers caught the worker who had been bribed to switch the genuine liquor with counterfeit bottles. The worker confessed immediately and the owner of Prestige Distillery was arrested with irrefutable evidence. That night, Prestige Distillery, the strongest competitor of Riverstone Distillery, collapsed. On camera, Gloria thanked everyone for their support and ended with a smile of relief. All of this wouldn't have been possible without my son and his friend. When Nathan arrived at the hospital, he was beaming with excitement. My mom agreed to invest in our joint software development project, he said, handing me a bank card and telling me it had $1 million on it. I refused it immediately. Tell your mom it's not necessary. I still haven't repaid the surgery costs for my grandmother, let alone the losses your family incurred. Just ask her to help us with some promotion, that's enough. He muttered something under his breath, tucking the card away. Then he produced another card. This one's for fixing the computer and for teaching me programming. I'll need more lessons from you in the future. It's only $100,000, but my mom gave it to me as a reward. This one. I handed over. I thought you'd forgotten. I snatched it from him and stuffed it in my pocket. He huffed, helping me pack up my things while grumbling, "You really don't hold back with me, do you?" Honestly, I was relieved to take it since I was worried about where Grandma and I would stay after she was discharged from the hospital. That was why I accepted it so readily. We rented a place for a few days and over the next several months. Thanks to Gloria's promotion, many wineries and businesses from other industries showed interest in our software. Before long, we started earning substantial profits. I used part of the money as a down payment on a new house with a garden. On the day we moved in, Grandma was thrilled, dancing around the garden with joy. "Oh my, such a big garden. Now I can plant all kinds of vegetables," she exclaimed. Seeing her so happy made all the struggles worthwhile. I turned the guest room into a workspace, spending my days updating and fine-tuning the software. Grandma's health was improving steadily, and sometimes she'd sit nearby wearing her reading glasses, watching me work. But every time I started typing code, she'd grumble about how the black screen with white text looked like little worms crawling around. Nathan would often call to discuss code with me, and our conversations were usually straightforward. But today he seemed hesitant. "Spit it out already," I said. He took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. My mom agreed to let me start a software development company. "Then what are you hesitating for?" "That's great news," I replied. "Yeah, but she gave me a tough condition," he said, sounding worried. "What condition?" "Just solve it and move on." He stayed silent for so long that I almost thought he'd hung up. Then he finally spoke. "My mom said she doesn't trust me to run the company alone. She said I need to win you over first." My hand slipped and I accidentally closed the window I was working on. Frustrated, I stomped my foot. Great. I finally had a breakthrough, and you ruined my train of thought." He apologized, his voice playful as he continued, "Oh, come on, Elsa. Just 3 minutes, talk to me for 3 minutes. What should I do?" I threw my mouse down in frustration. "Nathan, you really don't take a hint, do you?" He responded with a pitiful tone, "This scene feels awfully familiar. Are you getting back at me? What goes around comes around. So, are you going to say yes?" he asked hopefully. I crossed my legs. "This problem's a bit tricky. Maybe if you try a little harder, you might just solve it." Suddenly, the phone was snatched out of my hand by my grandmother, who was smiling warmly behind her reading glasses. "Hello, Nathan? It's Grandma. You should come over for dinner tonight. I've already started cooking. Elsa says you like shrimps and ribs. You have to come, okay?" Before I could say anything, Grandma hung up the phone. "Seriously, Grandma, can't you let your granddaughter play hard to get just once?" Before Selena was sentenced to death, I went to see her one last time. She was dressed in a dark blue prison uniform, her once beautiful hair now cut short. And she looked gaunt and worn out, her face devoid of any makeup. "Are you happy now seeing me like this?" she asked, her voice filled with bitterness. I couldn't help but find it a bit amusing. "I'm not a sadist. Why would I be happy? Do you think all of this is my fault?" She bit her lip. "Go ahead and laugh if you want. Stop pretending. Ever since we were kids, Mom and Dad favored you. After they were gone, Grandma favored you. Now even Nathan is good to you. I just couldn't stand it. Why is it that you always get special treatment? The attention, the praise, and even..." She paused as if realizing that saying more would make her look even more pitiful, and she stopped herself. You mean that even after living another life, you still ended up worse off than me? I finished her sentence for her. Her eyes widened in shock as if she was frozen in place. You were reborn too? I brushed some dust off my pants, choosing not to answer her question. Instead, I let out a cold laugh. You always blame fate, saying life has been unfair to you. But when it comes to being reborn, the universe didn't favor either of us, did it? The key difference is that you were the one who made the first choice both times. Don't you think the problem might lie within yourself? She furrowed her brow, her gaze distant as if she was trying to piece together everything that had happened. But it was clear she didn't want to accept this reality. I continued, speaking as if to myself. We're born of the same parents. Beauty of Ve always seen me as your enemy. Never once tried to harm you. What about you? You pushed me in front of a truck. And this time you wanted me to suffer your same miserable fate. You know exactly what you intended, El said, watching her reaction. She gave a bitter smile, shaking her head. That's not it. That's not it at all. You just happened to make the right choices. I looked her straight in the eye, speaking slowly and deliberately. Your problem is with your mindset. No matter what choices you make, they'll always be wrong if your heart is in the wrong place. How could your outcome ever be good? She glared at me with resentment. You knew that old hag would cause trouble. Why didn't you tell me? You did it on purpose. You must have done it on purpose. I'm telling you, you're not innocent in Marshall's death. Hearing Mr. Marshall's name brought a wave of sadness over me. Elle looked up and asked Selena one final question. Did Mr. Marshall ask for sandwiches? She looked confused and angry. That old man was dying. Who had the time to make sandwiches for him? A deep sadness welled up inside me. Elle remembered in my previous life how Mr. Marshall had eaten his fill of sandwiches but kept staring at that bowl of oatmeal. He mumbled something to me for a long time, and I had always thought he was upset about wasting the food. I reassured him that Elle would eat it. Booth used all his strength to knock the bowl out of my hand. At the time, Elle didn't understand why. He had never shown anger before. It wasn't until they found 2 types of poison in his stomach that Elle realized heck no, the oatmeal was poisoned. He was trying to warn me not to eat it. When Elle didn't understand, he used his last bit of strength to shatter the bowl. But Elle didn't understand why, knowing the oatmeal was poisoned, he still ate it so resolutely. Now, Elle finally understood. When Mr. Marshall ate that oatmeal, must have felt such disappointment, regret, and anger. He couldn't change anything in the end, so he used his remaining life to make one final, courageous stand against greed and evil. Looking at Selena's wrists, red and raw from the handcuffs, Elle felt a mix of sorrow and silent triumph. Mr. Marshall, you made it. They'd all pay for their evil deeds. At that moment, Elle said nothing. Elle simply smiled at Selena. I think what you want. Elle came here today to thank you. Thanks to your eagerness in choosing first, my grandmother is alive. But as far as I'm concerned, you're already dead to me and to her. As I turned to leave, she suddenly stood up, slamming her hands against the glass and screaming. Elsa, come back here. Come back. I'll kill you, I'll kill you. I didn't look back. I heard her voice, hoarse and desperate. If I get to live again, Elle won't make the same choices. No, Elle won't make any choices at all. If I get to live again, the first thing I'll do is kill you. Then it won't matter what I choose, you'll never have a better life than me. Her hysterical laughter echoed through the dark, empty hallway. I laughed too. Even if you get to live again, what difference would it make? A person with a rotten heart will remain rotten, no matter how many times they're reborn. No matter how hard you try, you'll never be more than a supporting character in someone else's story. Outside the prison, the sun was shining. A gentle breeze rustled the budding leaves on the trees. Everything felt new, full of life. I looked up at the sky, grateful. Thank you, the universe, for this life-changing exchange.